So, are we ready to begin?
Yeah, go ahead. We'll get started right now.
All right. Well, I'm gonna start off with a question. So what are we here to talk about today, guys?
Right. Well, we just wrapped up the Miata recently, so it'd be good to talk about that, I think.
Yeah, we're going to cover a couple topics. I think you guys have seen on Instagram that we are announcing the release of a Miata application. We just recently finished that, and we also kind of want to talk about what we've been up to and just any of the other adventures we've been doing and other shenanigans we've been doing at the shop. But yeah, again, if you guys have anything you want to ask us, please feel free to leave us a comment in there. We'll try to respond to whatever you guys want to know about what's going on here. So, well, the Miata was a lot of fun. We learned quite a bit on that application. We talked quite a bit about Miatas in general, but I'll kind of recap some of the, let's say, kind of difficulties with that platform and what we experienced. And yeah, I know, and also I know it's ironic that we're talking about a Miata, but there's obviously an old Toyota behind us. We'll probably touch base on that a little bit too. But yeah, going back to the difficulties of the Miata, yeah, those cars have very little travel in the wheel wells and also very little room for bump stops. So we had to do some pretty special things to get the most out of that chassis. But I think the end result was great. We've all ridden the car, and Skyler is one of our newer shock builders, and he can talk a little bit about what his experience was like. And I was thinking that we kind of recap for you guys on what it was like for us to R&D the car and what we kind of focused on and accomplished through each iteration. We essentially did 3 main iterations on the Miata, and we'll kind of break it down and just talk about like what we experienced and what went well and what didn't go well, and just kind of give you guys a little bit more insight on what it's like to be doing R&D here and what it's like for us. So yeah, I mean, I'll just put it out there. Version 1 was not good. And why was that? What would you guys say the reason was for that?
We messed up. We messed up is the short answer for version 1.
Yeah. We definitely were trying to record a video session of us measuring motion ratios while also measuring the motion ratios at the same time. And one of us, I'm not going to say who, wrote down the number incorrectly, which we plugged into our calculator, which gave us target valving and target spring rates, which then we put on the car and installed and set the ride height and set the corner weights and then drove it and hated it. And so unfortunately, we had a clerical issue that set us back a bit. So that was V1 in a nutshell. Although the back end we measured correctly, so that was actually pretty decent. It was just the front end of the car that was an issue. And what that actually was we put a 10K front spring on this car, and then I believe we had a 6K rear spring because that's what the math said. And I remember having a discussion with the guys here. I'm like, oh, that's weird. Everyone else is doing like a little bit different stagger, but our system hasn't done us wrong before, so we'll try that out. And yeah, it was very wrong. So it basically just meant that the car was it was just way oversprung in the front. You could just tell it was kind of pitching over bumps in the front and being overreactive compared to the rear. It also, what do you guys think? Do you think it understeered or oversteered? It understeered massively. So yeah, we went ahead and got those off as quickly as we could. We remeasured the motion ratios, and sure enough, we made a pretty big mistake. Plugged that back into the calculator. We got the right frequencies we got the same frequencies we were targeting for, but it required a much different valving profile and spring rate profile. And we installed that onto the car and tried it again. Did you get it right in the version 2?
I don't think I got to ride in the version 2.
So you were just there for the third one,
yeah,
right?
I was there for the nice completed package.
Okay, right on. Yeah, I mean V2 was good. We settled on for Fast Road Pro for the Miata. We settled on 8K spring rates in the front and 6K spring rates in the rear, and we had our. All right, cool. Sorry about that, guys. My phone turned off. I had to reset the change the settings on it.
That's okay. We're back. Thank you, everyone, for
All right,
rejoining
thank
us.
you
We're
guys.
back.
Sorry
We're
about
back.
that.
We're back.
Oh man, it's tough. First it's Wi-Fi issues, and then now it's my inability to use an iPhone. Apparently.
Okay, so
We're good now.
where were we at? I think we were talking about V2.
Yeah, we're talking. I was asking. I was asking who got to ride in it, but basically, well, we left off at on version 2. We got the spring rates and valving that we wanted, and we had the owner of the car, Chris, come out and drive the car, and we went out on some like local roads nearby. He got to drive it spiritedly, if you will. And we hit some larger bumps. He went through some like industrial areas, and he got to like get to velocity max on the tires, and yeah, he enjoyed it a lot. He enjoyed it a lot actually, and it was kind of weird because usually at that point we're done with R&D, and we'll give the owner the car back and just take down our measurements and notes so we can go into production. But we had recently been working on a new way of doing the compression circuit and the valving, and we really wanted to try it out. It's very experimental. We only had to use it on one other car. So we're like, hey, Chris, can we borrow your car again and have your car for more time so we can try one more version? And luckily, he was okay with that. And, by the way, I feel very grateful for the customers that we've had because they've been very cool about like letting us like test on their cars and keep moving the products forward. But yeah, he was cool with it, and we decided to go to one more version, which was version 3. And for that one, we knew the spring rates were working well for us for Fastwood Pro, but we wanted to test some new philosophies on the compression side that seemed to be really promising. And the main goal was to increase ride comfort primarily for fast road, but also to increase grip a bit. And yeah, I mean, we it was an experiment, it was a gamble, but it seems like it paid off. I know Skyler spent a lot of time working on some of those dampers to get them to give us the results that we wanted on the dyno. But we got it onto the car, and yeah, I mean, you got to ride in that one, right, Skyler?
Yeah. I got to ride in that one.
What was that like for you?
I mean, it was definitely worth it. Having gone from building multiple iterations of the same shocks to getting out there on the car with the whole coilover setup on it, it was very rewarding to actually get to ride on it. We took it down the highway, and then mostly I think we were just picking up food that day, but nothing too crazy. But I could definitely feel a difference from other Miatas I've ridden in, my car especially. It's just usually, I guess for the Miatas that I think of, especially for the NA generation, they're around the like time of like 2 years ago or so, like when I first got my car, like they were really cheap. They were a dime a dozen. People would sell Miatas for like a parts car and a Miata for like very affordable price.
Like $500, right?
Yeah, like super cheap. And so, I mean, people treated them accordingly. Like, so now there's not a lot of clean examples, kind of like, with the Corollas and a lot of the other 80s, 90s enthusiast cars. But yeah, like the difference between a really high quality setup where, you're focusing on grip and actual like suspension travel versus just like, slam it to the ground. And then like, because there's no suspension travel, then it's stiff kind of deal. Definitely notice the difference.
Yeah, I mean, we've been targeting kind of what we think is like a new wave of owner, which is people that are seeing these cars as more like collectible classics that they want to drive and have fun on the road. Like much like we've done with some of our older applications. Obviously, the Corolla is one. We just wanted the car to be fun. We have already gotten some people requesting us to do a club spec version of this, and that will be very different. That's like, comfort is out the window. Like, actually, I don't want to say that, but like, we want to focus on performance above anything else. Usually, our CSPs are actually pretty comfortable as well, but yeah. So this kind of owner is someone that's like a little bit more mature and wants to just kind of enjoy driving the car, going to the meets. Going out to get coffee, driving it through like, Highway 9 area and just having a good time with the car and not getting like beat up, not feeling like they need to go home in their Highlander just because they're so tired of like driving their Miata. We want it to be like enjoyable for going up the mountain and also coming back home. Right. So yeah.
Really quick on that note about ride quality and performance. John Balalalaga asks, is there a difference if I purchase your suspension with or without Swift springs?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So I think John's asking if he bought it with Annex springs versus Swift springs. Does that sound right?
That sounds right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we get asked this question pretty often, and it's definitely worth discussing because, like, unless you are using a spring rater or have been able to test a whole bunch of different springs, like, it's really hard to know, like, what's gonna, what's the difference, right? So in general, the Swift springs are gonna have a little bit less sag initially. So when springs are first made, they'll have a free height, but then after they get used, they'll sag a little bit. The Swifts are a little bit more consistent in that regard. The Swifts are a bit lighter, and the Swifts can have a little bit better grip. And the Swift is able to do this because they're their own like metal manufacturer. Like the parent company of Swift Racing Springs is actually a metallurgy company. So in order for them to build the best possible spring material, they just invented their own, and so they were able to get something that's able to be compressed more and is also lighter at the same time and more consistent. So to get back to your question, honestly, for most people with fast roads, the Annex springs are great and they're going to work just fine. Some people like the color of the Swifts; they do look really awesome on the product, and like, dude, sometimes that's worth it, right? You just want to have it look like even better, right?
Sometimes you just want to flex on people with that color.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, like my own car, I put Swifts on it, right? Even though it costs more. So, yeah. So like, you're not gonna. It's gonna be hard to tell a difference if you have the same dampers from us with the Annex springs or the Swifts. It's gonna be subtle. The difference is gonna be subtle for sure. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question a bit.
Thank you for the question, John. Drew Duel also says, not a question, but I've been enjoying my set of fast roads on my BRZ. Cannot wait to test them on my next track day.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. Yeah, we've got quite a few FRS BRZ kits in the field. And yeah, I mean, we appreciate your guys' support. It's definitely been a lot of fun developing on that chassis.
Chase in Motion. Thanks for joining us, Chase. Skyler's actually just how far are you on Chase's coilovers right now?
I just took off all the coilover components from it now, so it's down to the bare shocks, and I'm gonna get started on that next week. Hopefully.
Oh man, Skyler, you better hurry up. He says my Swifts are awesome. They also perform well on track. Well, Chase can't perform well on track if we're still building his coilovers.
Yeah, we'll touch on this a little bit later, but we've had some updates that we are inviting our team drivers to send in their dampers for us to put the latest tech in it. So yeah, can't wait for Taylor to get on track with a new setup and tell us what he thinks. And by the way, if you guys don't know or aren't following Chase in Motion, you totally should. Taylor's a friend of mine, but he's also a savage competitor in Nissan Challenge. He's like dominating right now, and he has essentially a stock S13 hatch with like a KA24, that truck engine, right? And it seems like he's like seconds or multiple seconds faster than a lot of the other like people in the field, and he's been winning every single event basically. So yeah, we're super proud of him, and it's really exciting to watch him when he goes out.
So why don't we get back to V3 on the Miata, if that sounds good for you guys?
Yeah. I mean, the only other thing I want to mention is that we also went from the prototype top hats to a new custom billet top hat on the rear that allows for more suspension travel and allows for more room for the bump stops to engage. So we just finished the drawings for that, and we're going to send them out to get cut pretty soon. But the first NA kits will have those. So yeah, we'll be making an announcement pretty soon, so you guys will be able to pick up a Miata set if you're interested.
One more time to recap. So even though we're done with the NA RnD, we're not ready to sell yet because we're designing in-house made rear extended top hats for that kit before we release to market. All right, so where are we at? We went over V3 driving impressions. We designed our top hat, problems with each iteration.
John mentioned that he he's on lowering springs and stock shocks on his Z, and he said it's horrific. And we can kind of talk a little bit about why that happens sometimes, because I think it might just be.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Yeah,
I'd
I
be
was gonna
interested
say,
to hear that.
lowering springs and shocks is actually a pretty potent combination, but if done wrong, it's very wrong. So
Yeah, I don't know if that's obvious to you guys yet, but we're really obsessed with bump stop heights here. We're essentially having people go through a bunch of extra work when they install the race suspension, the Club Spec Pros on their car, because we want to allow people to have basically like infinite control of their bump stop height. And the reason is because it's really important to get the best performance out of the car. So I think in John's case, I think when he's saying that and John, you can correct us if I'm wrong here, but I think the reason why it's really uncomfortable for you is because it's not that the springs are too stiff for the shocks. It's just that the shock is at a stock height and you've lowered the car, and that bump stop is now relatively higher to the chassis now that you've lowered it. So you essentially don't have much suspension left because you took away the usable stroke in the shock, and you're basically on the bump stops all the time. So if you took those lowering springs, which I'm sure are great lowering springs, but just coupled it with a shorter stroke shock, like maybe an off-the-shelf Coney or something, it might actually work out okay. You could try that out. But if it doesn't, then hit us up. We have a really good setup too.
all right, so back to the Miata R&D. So where I'm at, Skyler's experience with the whole R&D process. This is the first time we've had our newest shock builder go through the entire R&D process with us from start to finish.
true,
so
yeah.
why don't you talk about some of your impressions doing R&D with us, Skyler?
Well, I mean, I was really excited to have the Miata in. I mean, sitting here in Ezekiel's garage, is just literally right across the way from where
Just
I was
because I
working
work
on the
in here
shocks.
doesn't mean it's my personal garage, man. This is, if you guys can't tell, it's a real shop. It's not my home garage.
Oh, I meant your shop's garage. But yeah, it was right here. We did all the measurements. I learned a lot through that process about like there's building shocks, and then there's actually like the application of it, and you guys are talking about like bump stop height and things like that, suspension travel. There's so much to learn, and so I'm really happy to be here learning it all and perfecting it all with you guys.
Yeah, and actually, kudos to Skyler, because building shocks repeatedly is very difficult across the industry. So it doesn't matter if it's a legacy, really super high-end racing shock company. I'm sure you've heard all these brands, or companies that are kind of starting off. Building shocks repeatedly is very difficult and time-consuming. And unfortunately, Skyler had to jump in here when we had a backlog of shocks and help out. And he had to learn quickly, and we gave him a lot of guidance. But you didn't really get to actually experience the product until the Miata, basically, right?
Yeah.
So you were just cranking the shocks out, putting in hours of time, but he didn't actually get to feel it. So we were glad that he got to actually experience all this, after all this like labor and like sweat, that equity that get put into this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool to see what we're achieving on our shock dyno and our targets actually translated into like how it feels on the road. It's a very big difference.
Speaking of R&D cars, DC5 twisties, thank you. I know you're on a majority of our lives. Are you guys doing R&D upon majority of interested or requested chassis only?
This makes me sad every time.
Dude, it makes me sad too, man. I really want to do a DC5 app. I've wanted to do it for like a year and a half, but sorry, I got kind of loud on the mic here. But you can tell the emotions I'm feeling, because I really want to solve your guys' problems, but the DC5 has a lot of problems. So we've been consulting with some people that really understand that chassis, and there's a lot of custom machining for the bracketry that needs to be basically done from scratch, because there's so many issues with bump steer, because of how they have the steering rack mounted on those cars. And not only is there just one issue with bump steer, but you have to adjust it based on how low the car is. So that mounting point for the tie rod needs to be adjustable on the coilover assembly. And I mean, we could do that. It's just it's a very intensive engineering process, and we do have other applications where there's more demand that honestly is going to take less work. So it makes sense for us to pursue those first. But I do hope someday we can get to the DC5 because it's like a personal vendetta for me. Like, I don't know if I have to do it myself off company time or what, but I would really like to figure that one out.
Yeah, it's a. I think it'll be worth it in the long run. I would like to see us getting there too, because my girlfriend actually has an EP3, and so that's basically the same suspension layout. And there's a lot of yeah. I quickly learned after a lot of searching around, like there's not a lot of good solutions to all these problems. So it'd be cool to see us tackle that eventually.
Yeah.
Our neighboring shop, Burstcraft, thank you for joining us again, man. Hopefully you can come down and visit us again in person. It says DC5 is a labor of love and a massive headache all in one. I agree with the headache part.
Yeah. And also, we were lucky enough to have Burstcraft come here and actually check out our V2 version of the Miata. We didn't get to quite sync up for V3, but yeah, I mean, actually, I'm hoping we can get a set onto his car so we can evaluate it as a shop owner himself. Hopefully, he can give us some good feedback.
All right, so Skyler, any more experience with the R&D process?
Let me think. I think I pretty much said everything I wanted to. Let's see. Eventually, I would like to get to driving some of these R&D cars, but
Yeah.
A lot of my experience has been actually on a spring perch and shock setup, basically lowering springs and shock setup. So it's interesting hearing about that and hearing the differences.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I also kind of want to talk about what we've been up to recently.
Sure. So really quick, let's just do a quick closing on the Miata R&D. So one more time, we are not quite there yet for official release of the Fast Road Pro NA Miata kit, and the reason for that, we're making in-house designed extended top hats. So very soon, not yet, but a ton of time went into this R&D process, 3 iterations, and how many different people to come over to test drive, plus our entire team test driving too. So yeah, thank you guys for the support, and look out for the NA Miata. Look out for the NA Miata Fast Road Pro setup coming soon. So yeah, now that we've awkwardly done that, why don't we talk about what we've recently been up to?
Yeah, I mean,
we've been busy.
Yeah, we've been busy, but we had some fun too. As you guys know, I also have a 86, and I really like that thing a lot. We as a group, we went to Thunderhill and we went racing with some other Corolla guys. And that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, understated, all Corolla run group.
Yeah, which is, I mean, honestly, I didn't realize so many cars were going to show up because it's so difficult to get a Corolla to make it to a track day, and then a whole nother level of difficulty to get through the track day, and then the final stage is being able to drive home. Right?
And I was really impressed because a lot of the Corollas drove there. They weren't like trailered like you see a lot of other cars. Like there'll be nice new cars that you see coming out, like getting pulled out of trailers at the track, like brand new Porsches or Mustangs or things like that, like being trailered. And yeah, a bunch of these Corolla owners with 40-year-old cars coming out and driving their cars here. I think one of the people we saw they were camping. They camped out in front of Thunderhill.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it was pretty hardcore.
It was cool.
Yeah, I mean, when we were gridding up, I only rode passenger, but when we were gridding up, just seeing all those Corollas lined up was actually really cool. It had like a weird nostalgia feel of like, I never experienced it, but that's how I'd imagine like in another time it would be,
Yeah. I'd say this last month, despite us being really busy with production and, all the other things that are involved with, running a business, there's been a lot of like Corolla activities for us this month, and that's always fun. For example, you can see there's a car in the shop getting fitted with the Annex right now. Is that right?
Yeah, Fast Road Pro 7K 4.7 in the rear.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess one thing, someone walked in here and commented how long I have the shocks set, and this customer is actually in his 50s, and pretty much what he stated is like, I want a better handling ride that's not gonna beat me up. I want a ride height that's closer to stock, just a little bit lower than stock. So for me, it's good to know that like whether I want to bring this to the track, or in this case, like a resto mod for, if you're like an older gentleman and like, I don't want to scrape everywhere and I don't want this car to beat me up. The Annex Fast Road Pro can actually do both for you.
Yeah. I mean, in this local area, like the roads are pretty dang rough. Like every time I drive home, like, I'm hitting a couple of like where like the bump extends across the entire freeway. Like you're not going to get around it. And I mean, there's only so slow you can go. That's safe for being on the freeway. So, I mean, you're going to hit some of those bumps one way or another. So yeah, having that compliance is very nice.
I remember to go on with that. I remember the epiphany I had when I was when I was younger, realizing that all the JDM shocks that I adored just rode like crap out here, and then making the connection like, oh yeah, all the roads there are like, parking lots. So like, of course they don't have to worry about, harsh impacts, but for us, the development is quite the opposite. And there's actually, let's just call it a project that we're working on, but the goal is we're working with another company, and the goal is we're making dampers so that that their customer base can get better ride quality than what the car had with the stock shocks. So it's just really cool, because not only we're doing performance, but we're also like solving engineering problems on different applications. So like literally this customer base has bought a car and they're not racers, but they just wanted to have something that's adjustable and rides better than stock, and we're fulfilling that need. And it's really cool. It's really rewarding to be able to kind of do the whole spectrum.
And that ties in with what you're saying about our customer base, which is very like, you want something that's well set up, that's refined, that's not just like thrown together haphazardly and like just given to you.
Really quick, we have a couple of viewer questions. So, or I guess statements. Felipe says, Grant, answer your DMs. And yeah, you guys, if our DMs get absolutely flooded. So, and then, try to keep track of your DMs. You can't search through your DMs. If you need a response, absolutely support at annexsuspension.com. That's the best way to get responses back. And then John once again asks, I spoke with someone in the DMs before about having true rear prototypes for the Z33 chassis. Any update on that? And I'll start off by saying we don't get a lot of requests. I want to say very few requests for true rear on the Z33. And I did a shop visit this morning who has a Drift Z33 on our traditional divorce. They are more than happy with that setup. So, it kind of is what it is.
Yeah, we do have that application, and like Ezekiel said, we don't get a lot of customers requesting that, but we are able to build that setup with the true rear. So if you're really interested, just shoot us a message and see how we can help you out.
8086 Rodriguez says, do you guys sell the spindle with the coilovers for an 8086? And yes, absolutely. So we have our own in-house spindle. So when you buy coilovers, no cutting, no welding, there's spindles ready to go for you.
So I noticed our friend and fellow racer, Felipe. Hey, Felipe. What's up, man? Who apparently I did not respond to a message. I'm sorry, Felipe. So I know Felipe from our development with the 86 Drive Challenge guys when we were racing, when we were developing the Club Spec Pros. So actually, my question for Felipe is it looks like he's interested in a set for the Miata. How are you going to use the car? Because I know you as a hardcore race driver. Are you looking for a race setup for the Miata, or do you have a Miata you just drive for fun? And I'm asking because I'd like to know more about what people are expecting out of these cars, so we can kind of fill those needs.
Couple of questions. Q60 and CX3 coilovers. We can't do any of those. We get absolutely no requests for those. But yeah, sorry about that.
But we appreciate the interest. Yeah.
Felipe says all racetrack.
All racetrack.
How do you drive? Right. How do you drive on the street if you go all racetrack? Does the car like skip over the street and go to the racetrack?
But yeah, so Felipe, if you want to do a race setup with us, maybe we can talk about developing a CSP on a Miata.
That sounds very fun, because I know there's Miatas have always been known for their presence in motorsports. So lots of spec Miata guys.
But actually, I don't know if I mentioned this, but we were surprised by how much interest we got in the Miata application even before we started Miatas, because my viewpoint is that there's like a zillion companies making suspension for Miata, and there's like just as many making race suspension. So, but yeah, I mean, please let us know. I mean, I'm confident that if you guys are asking us to build a setup, I'm confident you guys will like it. Yeah, just looking for the opportunity to do that.
Especially with some of the stuff we've been working on with the fast roads. Yeah.
You gotta say it to the viewer, Skyler. You can't just whisper it to Grant. You gotta say it to the world.
Rainbow Road Track Day. That's hilarious. Okay, cool. Yeah, and then actually speaking about racers, or speaking of racers, so you know how we were talking about coming up with a new compression circuit for the dampers we've been building. This new setup that we've been working on was so promising that we immediately wanted to go and put it on race cars to see if we can get some benefits there. So I was fortunate enough to work with Joe McGuigan with his he has an MRS track car as well as a FRS track car, both on Annex, and I had the opportunity to we were able to build some shocks with the new tech that we have and put it onto his car, and we got to test it at Sonoma a couple weeks ago, and yeah, it was awesome. I mean, we definitely tweaked some things for race applications instead of like just comfort for the street. But the way that car was handling berms and sticking afterwards, it was just blowing through the stuff and just did not care. Like the feedback from the drivers that drove it was just like the car just does not care about berms. Like it just blows over it, and it's super comfortable, and was already improvement over our already good setup for the MRS. So I basically, and I got to ride on the track as well, and like it was so much fun because that car had a 2ZZ, and it's got like aero, yeah, basically all the things you can do to an MRS to make it fast. And yeah, I took that feedback and we went straight back to the lab, and we're now inviting our other team drivers to send in their shocks so we can give them some updates. So that's why Taylor's shocks are here, and I'm sure we'll be getting some more shocks back in the next few weeks so we can do this update and start getting some early feedback. And once that's done and validated, we're gonna do some more testing, and then we'll eventually start feeding that into the club spec product.
Mm-hmm. And revalving isn't only just for our racers. Is that correct, Grant?
Yeah, I mean, so we've had some customers, purchase a softer setup from us, and then later on they got a little bit more serious, and they, we're able to revalve their fast roads to do something, that allows them to run like higher spring rates as well. But what's more common is that people will send in an update entirely to Club Spec Pro, and we do have this upgrade path for people, which is pretty cool because so a lot of our customers they're kind of getting into cars, but you can tell they're very they're very passionate about it, and they want to get more serious. And they'll start off with fast roads. They'll go to the first track day. They'll still drive the car to work, but then I think it just kind of burns their mind, like, oh shoot, dude, like racing is so fun, I want to keep doing it. And then next thing you know, they've got like sway bars on the car, it's got different wheels, it's got like race tires, it's got all this stuff done to it, and they need to update to CSPs because they've basically have a race car now. And we've seen this multiple times in the course of just months. So like you can tell when the bug bites, it bites really hard. And I think that's why we're all here on a Friday night talking about like dampers, right? Because we're obviously addicted. So yeah, I can relate.
Chase in Motion says those shocks are going to get me to sub 2 at Button Willow.
That's right. Yeah, it better.
Yeah. Chase, what is your PB at Button Willow right now? And then Metal SU37, what's the main difference between this upgrade versus the piston upgrade to help the 8.6 Club Spec Pro on the street?
Oh man, I'm pretty sure that's Dustin, who's going to be visiting us from Colorado.
Oh, next week.
Yeah, next week. Yeah. And I was thinking about that in my mind in my head because I was talking to Dustin recently about arranging logistics, and he's asking because he recently sent in his shocks to be updated to the latest CSP spec, and we now again have another iteration that's even better. But yeah, short answer is, Dustin, these are going to be even better than what we sent you. So yeah, get some more podiums, and when you're ready for a refresh, I would love to get you updated on on the latest stuff again. Yeah. It's such a slippery slope. Yeah.
Yeah, that was pretty funny. TPC or TP Colgate.
So, well, I mean, I can talk about some stuff in my own fleet that's changed.
Sure.
I really want to hear about this. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
and Grant certainly has a fleet. Jesus.
it's fine. It's fine. Like some of them run. I can't even say most of them, but yeah. So, I've been checking out MRSs more and more on track, and our good friends Joe McGuigan and Tony Rodriguez are both racing probably some of the fastest MRSs in the country, if not the fastest ones. And yeah, I hung out with them at the track and got to ride in their 2ZZ powered MRSs and had a complete blast. And so I went out and I bought an MRS, and I'm going to take delivery on it on Sunday. But I don't know what you guys think about the MR2 Spiders or / MRS, but I'd love to hear your feedback on it, because I personally am like really excited for the car. We do have experience with this car, because one of our early R&D cars that we did was exactly that. It was a 2ZZ swapped MRS, and I knew very little about those cars at the time, but I remember after that R&D experience, I was like, oh, this car's like really fun. Like I would take an MRS with a 2ZZ over an S2000. Yeah, any day. And I remember Chris Van, looks like he just joined. I remember we were having this conversation when we were, evaluating the test dampers, and we were kind of talking about like, dude, this car's cool. Would you take an S2000 or this? And we both agreed we would take an MRS over it. And yeah, what do you know? I ended up buying one. It doesn't have a 2ZZ yet, but
Tyler says needs a case swap with 3 exclamation marks after that.
Yeah, right. I mean, the thing, I think the reason why I'm suddenly interested in these cars is they actually weigh 2,150 pounds on our scales here, on like just normal car, not stripped or anything like that. 2,150 pounds is what that car weighs from the factory. Excuse me. And like the fact that they made a car in the year 2000 or so that was that low is pretty incredible. And I think people have just been sleeping on these cars. I've been looking around, and there's like very little aftermarket support for them. There's especially in the damper realm, there's not a lot of good options. I even was looking at like Japanese websites to see what kind of parts are available for these things, and there's not much. There's really not much. And I think that I personally feel like that's going to be changing pretty soon, because it's hard to imagine a more analog car that's that light, that is also very capable on track, for under $10,000, and is still readily available. Like if you go look right now on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, whatever your favorite place is, like there's loads of them, and they're not modified. They're not clapped out, like Miatas or Corollas or 240s. Like there are loads of cars that are ready to be, hopefully tastefully modified and just enjoyed, and like I'm actually pretty excited for it. So I'm sure you guys will see more MRS content in the future. But yeah, and I just want to say, thanks again for Tony and Joe to introduce me into this world of MRSs, and I can't wait to dive head in. And then Felipe asks, are they cheap? I'd say they're comparable to Miatas these days. They are starting to creep up a bit, because I think people are starting to get more more aware that these cars are pretty special. And they also did not make very many of them. That car, the Toyota MR2 Spider, was a complete sales flop in the US. And I actually remember as a kid going to the dealership, and I was with my mom, and she was looking for a sports car actually, and we went and checked one out, and we realized that car had like 0 storage. Yeah, are you familiar about this, Skyler?
I've driven an MRS before. Yeah.
Yeah, it's extremely impractical cars, so I can totally see why they didn't sell very well. But there's not a ton of them out there. But thankfully, there's still a lot of there's still a lot of clean ones out there. But yeah, so basically, if you were to get a pretty clean one with maybe 100,000 miles or so, or 80,000 miles, you should expect to spend about like 10,000 or so. So it's not the cheapest thing, but they're still obtainable, and you can find cheaper ones on the market if you're willing to deal with like higher miles or maybe the car needs a little bit of work, such as mine.
Aaron AKC Lee joined us and says, working on the Corolla, and this is the perfect background music.
Yeah, literally, it's a Corolla in the background.
Keep up the great work. And funny, Aaron's also another one, bought an early Fast Road Pro kit, and then just recently was like, oh, well, I'll just buy a Club Spec Pro kit because the car is going to be full race car now.
Yes, that's exactly what happens. But
And what car is that for?
AE86.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I've been following his build on Instagram, and car's looking amazing, man. Keep up the good work.
Like in the Fast and Furious, they say like, okay, you're the one gonna pray this time because you bit the chicken first, Jesse. So Skyler, because you are you are the newest shock builder to the team. You are gonna not say the prayers, but like give the closing wrap up this time.
All right. Well, it was great having everyone on this live. This is actually my first time doing an Instagram live, so that was pretty fun too. And so couple of points. We have some pretty dang cool stuff coming out for our racer shocks, that technology will basically trickle down onto all our products, which I'm actually really excited about. I'm probably gonna buy a set sooner or later once I finish my project. We pretty much wrapped up on the Miata through multiple iterations and a lot of work from everyone. Made that pretty much perfect, and we need the top hat still, right? Or we sent those to get machined.
Final cuts on those.
Yep, and then Grant got a MRS, which is actually pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's literally crazy. Like I was supposed to get rid of like 3 cars before this happened, but
so before he settled on MRS, I think he mentioned to me like 2 weeks ago that he wanted a 4-door. So pretty much opposite end of the spectrum, but
I'm
very
not surprised. I'm very not surprised.
Okay, well, thank you guys so much. I know I know talking about shocks on a Friday is kind of an unusual way to spend your Fridays, but we always appreciate you guys joining, and it's always a lot of fun.
And for you guys that didn't stick around since the beginning, this will also be on audio-only podcast, Annex Suspension Podcast, and also on YouTube. So, yeah, thanks again, you guys, for all the support. Thank you, Skyler, for joining us today. And, if you guys have questions, make sure to ask ahead of time, either through email or through DM, and then we'll get to them on the next live. So, yeah, look forward to that. Thank you, guys.
All right, thank you, guys.
All right, cool.